going to continue to do the website, to work on the website today.
That the most fascinating problem in the world is who am I? What do you mean? What do you feel when you say the word I myself? I don't think there can be any more fascinating preoccupation than that, because it's so mysterious, it's so elusive. Because what you are in your inmost being escapes your examination in rather the same way.
I think I'm just going to study the physics layout now. I did everything again in the way that I was doing before, and it works. I'm also thinking about it, whether or not it makes sense to do this project here on nights and weekends, or maybe to try to do something with AI, because things are evolving very fast, so it feels kind of pointless to do anything, to be honest, because AI is evolving too fast, and I think it's gonna take over everything probably next few years. Who knows how long it's gonna take, but yeah. So maybe try to do something that integrates AI and blockchain is better, but it's also a very challenging problem. So
this problem has fascinated me for many years, and I've made many inquiries. What do you mean by the word I? And there is a certain consensus about this, a certain agreement, especially among people who live in Western civilization. Most of us feel I, ego, myself, my source of consciousness, to be a center of awareness and of a source of action that resides in the middle of a bag of skin. And so we have what I have called the conception of ourselves as a skin-encapsulated ego. Now, it's very funny how we use the word I. If we just refer to common speech, we are not accustomed to say, I am a body. We rather say, I have a body.
So the way that it works, as far as I understand so far, is when you click on the run layout, it uses the ngraph force layout thing, which uses the physics engine, which is another library from ngraph. And I'm trying to understand how it works. And it's using this function here somewhere, but I want to understand. I think that the way that it is here, it doesn't create a feedback loop of animation, but I've seen that it uses the request animation frame, so I'm not really sure how it works on the loop, because I want to create something that is similar to Vue.js, where you have the animation and you can change the physics simulation so that you can visualize and interact with the nodes. So this is the function that runs, I think, at the beginning. Calls this scene is create scene, I think. I've seen need scene, and then it calls this function here, which is from this thing, from this library. And this create scene is the other library, which is the WGL library, which does the communication with the code here and the language for programming the shaders in WebGL. And this determines the colors of the nodes. I was changing this yesterday as well. And I think this function does the loop.
We don't say, I beat my heart, in the same way as we say, I walk, I think, I talk. We feel that our heart beats itself, and that has nothing very much to do with I. In other words, we don't regard I myself as identical with our whole physical organism. We regard it as something inside. And most Western people locate their ego inside their heads. You are somewhere between your eyes and between your ears, and the rest of you dangles from that point of reference. But by and large, we locate ourselves behind the eyes and somewhere between the ears, as if within the dome of the skull there was some sort of arrangement, such as there is at the SAC headquarters in Denver, where there are men in great rooms surrounded with radar screens and all sorts of things, and earphones on, watching all the movements of planes all over the world. So in the same way, we
don't know why it disposes the scene once, if it has the scene here. I guess it's just to drop everything that happened and then render the thing again. But I wonder if there's a better way to update this. I'm trying to understand the loop here. How it's rendering each frame, the whole cycle, so I can think about how I'm gonna change the code so that... The problem is that I'm gonna have to download this and install it locally, and I'm gonna have a bunch of different problems because of the way that is written here with the require statements. And this is the part that I stopped last time, I think.
Is the ordinary, average conception of what is oneself.
And this is the function that is using to run the layout, which uses this object here, which uses this thing here, which translates everything to the WebGL, I think, to run the simulation or to update the values. And this function is from the other file, I think, that I was just looking at, in this file here. And that's why I was trying to console log the dimension, just understand, because it looks like it needs true values, but it's passing 1 here. So this function looks like it needs true values, just this one. But it just passes dimension here. I guess it's gonna return this function, and then this is gonna be called so these are the arguments that it's passing. It's passing these arguments, and then this whole thing is the other arguments. Has a bunch of nested functions inside. So each one of them has this code here that is gonna probably be used on WebGL. And these are the values from the beginning of the options for the simulation, I think. I do a simple change here to see what happens. Instead of doing this step, I'm gonna do a bunch of steps at the same time. I don't remember this how to do while loops on JavaScript. So this is what I imagine. I'm just gonna like it doesn't show the animation, that's the thing. It's puts a giant number, but it's gonna be the same thing because it's also not a complicated. Maybe I'll run the other script because it has more data to see. So you might be doing the animation, but it's just too hard to see because it's too fast. Oh fuck. The other problem as well is that I was seeing that once you have the graph and you send more data, it just messes up the graph instead of updating the initial one. And it's gonna be hard to think about how to update the graph instead. But I think that I wanna make it so that it updates instead of creating the graph in the beginning, in the first place. Because that's the whole point of the thing. Oh, maybe it's because it's not. It should be working. That's weird. I don't know if the loop is breaking the site. So I think this just controls the frame, the amount of frames that it runs. And this is what creates the loop and renders the frame.
You like to know who you are. Then keep coming closer. There's an ocean full of stars. You hold on tight and let your heart explore. Would you like to know who you are? Would you like to know who you are?
Finally.
Keep coming closer. There's an ocean full of stars.
There's also something I need to change on this because I know that it's not building the same way that it was building directly from Python. Because I think it's, if I pass the return events, it just goes one level deeper than it should, and then it makes everything disconnect. Because this should be just one graph where everything is connected. But I don't understand why it's breaking the sides if I make this a lot bigger. It's probably because it's taking a long time, but it should eventually, it shouldn't take that much time, and it should eventually load everything there. Maybe it was something else, maybe it's the network connection. Yeah, it should be console logging here. Oh no, it's console logging 0. So now it seems like it's working. Yeah, so I think like I can control the animation, the physics engine by changing this, and this is gonna change the loop there, the amount of times that the loop runs. So I need to understand how this thing is gonna be very hard, because I think I'm just gonna leave like with these colors. Maybe I'll change later or give options to change the color by making them to be a variable, and then I can connect the options there, or create a button or something like this. I think I'm gonna leave it like that, and I'm just gonna focus on studying the engine first and trying to understand how to build the simulation, the physics simulation. It's just gonna go inside of this function. This is gonna determine the amounts, and then this function is the one that draws the stuff. By using the WebGL, the other WebGL functions of the other library to communicate with the program. And this is gonna draw out the text. So I think that's this works on a loop, the request animation frame, and then on the other function is canceling when it disposes the scene, I think. That's the position, and then what is this update? Nodes and lines, and then the nodes are gonna be the points. So it's gonna be a program. Yeah, I need to understand more study the documentation there to understand the programs. Updates. It's probably a draw. Oh, linked. Online.
The kindness in his eyes, it's all gone.
Oh, it must be from this one.
This man is fool, or is he wise?
Oh, so that's where the colors. That's where you can change the color.
Of an honest man, it turns off when no one believes he can. His face on the ground, bittersweet. He knows, oh, he knows he won't drown. No matter what it takes, he's gonna find a way. Our love is the strength of the wise. Oh no, no matter what it takes, we're gonna find our way. We won't, oh, we won't break. You won't drown. You won't drown.
This is probably the create scene thing here.
You won't break. You won't. Oh no. Oh no.
So this is gonna become this vertex here, and it's gonna add on this program, which is the web gel thing. Which just returns a number. think I need to study the VJS one first, because I need to understand how... Because the thing is, here it becomes like a static thing. Even though it's animating, because it's manually doing step by step on each frame, I think. Based on this loop here. If you want to make the graph like have motion, put layout steps and then it's gonna go through this loop. It's just because it's requesting the animation frame, it calls the function recursively and goes on a loop, and then I think it renders each frame based on this stuff here. And then if you have this, it's gonna do this step, and then this step is the thing that makes the animation. It makes the graph move. But I don't understand really well like how it's done so that on the VJS you have the feeling that you can move through the graph.
Into which he was popped at some moment. Whether it was conception or whether it was parturition is a little bit vague. But there is in our whole
So I need to think about how to go from that way, where you have to call the step function each time to move the graph, to a more like dynamic way where it's moving all the time. That's the question. But I don't understand really well how it works on here, because like on top of, I think I understand now how it works. Like all these functions are communicating with the program, and then he constructs the code based on a bunch of different functions there, of what's gonna happen on the actual program when you call these functions. It's just changing the structures at the lowest level in the GL collection. That is the program that communicates with the buffer to create the vertex shader and position. So I don't understand this part. Like I understand it on the concept level, but not how to change, because I don't know really well the language as well for the program, and like how exactly are all the pieces put together when the program is running. But on top of understanding that, I have to understand how I need some direction on which way to go, so I can change the code from the way that it is here to the way that is more dynamic, where I can like do this stuff here where I'm just moving through the graph, and it's kind of like an animated thing where it's moving. Maybe I should study this one first and see how they do it, and then I have like, I think the goal should be to move from what I have right now, which is just more this static thing that I can click here and then it's just gonna give steps on the frames, to more of something that is dynamic here, like this, where the graph moves by itself, which I imagine is pretty much the same thing that it's doing, but is like going on an infinite loop of motion, let's say, because there's probably some function, like there's probably the same animation loop here, animation frame, but then it doesn't require to call step to change the position of the nodes. And then there's event listeners that determine what's gonna happen. And this is probably attached to an event listener as well, and then by changing the thing here, it changes the function, it triggers the functions on the physics simulation and then on the physics engine, and then it changes the graph and the position of everything. But I need to understand more how the loop works here. It's very hard to... I'm not really sure if that's the best approach, because it might take a long time to understand on this one how it works, because it's a very big project. And there's the network X parts and the PyVis and then the VJS. think I should just superficially look at the similarities, try to think about the differences as well, and then from that like kind of abstract notion of how things work, try to change things on the one that I have there. The biggest problem is that I'm gonna have to download the library locally, because if I change directly on node modules, it's not gonna work, because it doesn't use the same, unless I figure out which one SvelteKit's using, and then I change that one, but it's not very good, I think. Because if I change directly on the source code, it's not gonna allow me to test things, I think. So I have to download this locally, and then it's gonna be a massive problem, because then I have to figure out all the other, like how to change all the require. So it's hard because like there isn't a way to change just small things and see how it works. Like I either have to change everything at once or nothing at all, and this is what makes it hard, I think. Unless I can think about a way to change gradually. The problem if I start with this one, I already need a good idea of how everything works, so I can rebuild this. But I guess I can maybe copy like some of the functions and then just build a small one, and then try to replace this one with the small one that I have with custom functions. I try to emulate the path of the execution from this step on the create layout here. This is gonna trigger the create physics thing here, create physics simulator, which is gonna generate these functions, which is gonna change the program there at the lowest level, I think. And it does that based on these files, which are the other files on the folder. It's not that hard to understand, I think, but it's very hard to know how to change everything, because there's a bunch of like it seems very simple, but it's extremely complicated, because you have to think about how all the calculations are done to keep like the track of all positions of everything that is happening when it's rendering, and then there's all the relative positions of the absolute way that it is outside of the canvas on the thing, the positions that exist inside the canvas, and if they're going to be the same as the positions inside of the WebGL or not.
From the standpoint of the sciences, shows us that we grow out of this world. That we, each one of us, are what you might call symptoms of the state of the universe as a whole. But you see, that is not part of our common sense. Western man has for many centuries been under the influence of two great myths. When I use the word myth, I don't necessarily mean falsehood. To me, the word myth signifies...
So Vue.js uses this emitter, and the ngraph uses the eventify thing. It's the same pattern. I'm gonna see if I can figure out like at what point. It's probably on the modules because of the way that it's importing there. It's probably one of these functions, but I want to try to understand the whole like software design of where does it start the animation here and how does the loop works for rendering each frame, so I can understand how the physics engine works on the loop to change on the project that I have there. I also realized today that I can just click here. It's a lot easier to go through the files instead of going manually. Yeah, I don't know where this file is. Yes, yeah. This is probably related to the positions of the canvas in relationship to the position of the dome, so that I can calculate the correct point in the graph. It's probably going to be the delta between the dome position and the canvas, and then from that point you calculate the positions of everything on the graph. And start simulation. I'm gonna look the other parts of the file, but I'm probably gonna investigate this after I read everything here. So this redraw is obviously interesting as well. It's probably on the beginning and it's related to the canvas, the renderer. Yeah, canvas renderer. The problem is that maybe I should create another project, like simple project. Because here, the issue is that I'm creating the graph from the Python, which makes things harder. Because it would be better if I could see this, like the event listeners here. But if I do it from here, then I have to see from the Python file, which is going to be a Jinja template, how this is connected with the update for the graph. Maybe I should create a simple project using only Vue.js, and then I can use the developer tools to see the connection between the event listeners of the buttons there in the site and how it triggers the simulation here. But I think I get the design of this. It's just when it starts drawing, it emits the events that it creates when it creates the network. And then through the events, it's going to trigger the functions that are going to trigger the solvers in the engine, the physics engine. And then those solvers are probably going to calculate the position of every node and the links, and then render the simulations, I think. Or render the frames, probably. It is easy to understand how it works here, but it's hard to think about how to change everything, because then I actually have to understand like how all the solvers calculate all the positions. And the main thing that is hard, I think, is to understand like at what point it is rendering each frame, I think. But I guess I just need to follow the functions there from the events. My concern with downloading, I looked into different libraries for physics engines, but the problem is that I might get into the same problem that I got with Pixie.js because of the whole thing that makes it more complicated about the server-side rendering and how that is related to the update cycle of the animations. So I think like somewhere in between would probably be best. If I could get not like a full library or framework, but a bunch of functions instead, and then incorporate the functions. Because that way, like at least this one that I have now is working. So, but it's very simple, but it's working. So if I could just adapt slowly, like get only some functions, and then put here, like translate the functions from one physics engine into the way that they need to be here to work with WebGL. So I think that the mix of Vue.js and this that I have there is probably the best thing, that is like the middle way, probably. So like try to copy, to get the functions that I have here from Vue.js, and just get one by one and try to translate them in a way that it works with the flow of this thing here. But the issue is the whole thing about the layouts. So I think I'm gonna have to download the libraries, then graph libraries. Maybe I already have them here. And then like I need to figure out how to like reconstruct everything in a way that is gonna work without using the require thing.
Now, the two images which have most profoundly influenced Western man are, number one, the image of the world as an artifact.
Yeah, I already have the libraries here.
Or a jar made by a potter. Indeed, in the book of Genesis, there comes the idea that man was originally a clay figurine made out of the earth by the Lord God, who then breathed into this clay figurine and gave it life. And the whole of Western thought is profoundly influenced through and through and through by the idea that all things,
So like something like getting these functions here, maybe I can copy the whole class and then try to do a mix. I understand how this one works and then incorporate this on the other one instead of using the ones that I have there. But I need to understand the fundamental things that I need to clarify is how the WebGL language works and how is translating the commands from JavaScript to WebGL, the whole flow, which is very confusing there. And then how it's doing the calculations for updating the positions and how that is different from the calculations that are done here from these physics engines, and then try to bridge the gap between the two. I think that's what I have to do. So, like ideally I would be able to do the exact same thing that VGS is doing, but then do it with WebGL and using the end graph instead. So just doing Pythagoras here to calculate the distance between x and y. Between the nodes, he creates the triangle, and then he gets the, I don't know how to say the name in English, but the one that connects. And doing this on a loop for all the nodes, probably. I know what it is, node in this side. Then it calls this function here. That's the distances and the forces. These x body forces. Just pass to the constructor. Yeah, but I think this is a good approach. I just have to, so I have to think about what is the like minimum thing that I can do. So like the goal is to, from this code here, to incorporate on the thing that I have, and in the as small incremental steps as I possibly can. Because at each step I have to debug and see if it's gonna work, and that's the hardest part, I think, to figure out. Like what is the smallest step that I can take from the stuff that I have right now to fully integrate this stuff on the other one. Like which part should I start with, given that there are so many things involved. I think that it has to be through the layout.step function there. That's the only thing that I have there that changes the position of everything. So I need to figure out like what kind of things that I can change on when the function runs to understand how the positions and everything is calculated. And then try to make it so that I have something more similar to this one that I have here on the VJS. Also, I don't understand really well, like I've seen that this relationship between the view, which is the camera of the thing, and the position of everything else, is also another thing that is complicated. Which here I've seen that it has camera, equates the camera at some point, using this WebGL thing. Or WGL library. I think it's another file. Get camera controller.
Man or any other living organism, and try and describe it accurately and scientifically. We find that our normal sensation of ourselves as isolated egos inside a bag of skin is a hallucination. It really is. It's absolutely nothing. Because when you describe human behavior, or the behavior of a mouse or a rat or a chicken or anything you want to describe,
It passes this API, which is this stuff that has the Eventify thing, I think.
you must also
Yeah,
describe
return API.
the behavior of its environment.
It's probably these objects. Yeah, with the Eventify that puts an event listener on all of these functions. So passes this and then draw contacts. Create camera. This is gonna be the camera controller. So it's passing this as a function. Probably it's probably on this file here that's interesting. Trying to understand where, at what point it creates this camera here. It's creating this from here. But it's just passing the function there. Also, it's gonna use one of these and then call with API, which is the Eventify, everything. But API is not WGL thing. I don't understand how you can pass API there if API is not a WGL thing. Just this eventify thing. These are also really interesting to see later. These functions here. I think I'm starting to understand. It's gonna take a long time, obviously, I think, to understand how everything is connected.
You were all I need. I was incomplete.
I'm trying to figure out where this is called
You were
the first time.
all I need, and I wrote it like a promise. You were all I need.
Oh, it's calling this. Maybe I was confused. One thing. Oh, it initializes everything with the passing the API to this thing here. Just gonna create this object or this class. All this stuff here. And returns this API thing with all these events attached to it, I think. And then creates the camera position by doing the calculations with the vectors from WebGL on the other file. Trying to follow the flow of execution here, so I can see where at what point is gonna call that function. It's gonna call this for each thing. And then from this point, where does it go? I think I need to go back on the first file to see. Because the thing is, I'm trying to understand when it calls the set camera thing, what function is passing there. When it calls this function, what does it pass here as the arguments? So I can understand where this thing comes from. But it's not calling there. So it is a WGL thing because it's this thing here. And I don't understand how this works really well. It's passing the object there. And the object has a bunch of functions. I remember seeing this library, like the source code is gonna loop. As far as I remember, it's gonna loop over everything, I think. And then it's gonna put these functions, create these functions for each other function. It's like adding events to all the functions that are passing there as an object inside of this thing. This should be the object, the subject should be the object with all the functions inside. And this is the thing that I don't understand really well, because it seems that from that code is adding the events, because this is gonna create the key is gonna be the object here, and the value is gonna be the array with the callback function and the context. But it doesn't create for each thing inside of this object here, it just creates for the whole object. Yeah, I don't understand really well how it works when you're emitting and creating events. It's very confusing. Yeah, but I think that is gonna be this thing here.
Instead of feeling that we, each one of us, are something that the whole realm of being is doing, we feel that we are something that has come into the whole realm of being as a stranger. When we were born, we don't really know where we came from, because we don't remember. And we think when we die, that's just going to be that. Some people console themselves with the idea that they're going to heaven, or that they're going to be reincarnated, or they're going to Summerland or something else. People don't really believe that. But for most people it's plausible. The real thing that haunts them is that when they die, they go to sleep and never going to wake up. They're going to be locked up in the safe deposit box of darkness forever. But that all depends, you see, upon a false notion of what is oneself.
So this API is getting pretty much everything that it has on this file, and then is creating the thing there. So it's calling this function, which is the eventify, but I don't understand really well how it works, the eventify. It looks like it creates it has the ability to put the on, fire, and off events through this whole object here. But to me, it would make more sense if it's adding the ability for each thing, for each function here. So like it's adding the events for each one of these functions, and then is with that is binding that to the scene, which is the element class there, and then it's calling this function and passing this eventify object to create the map controls, and that's going to be the camera controller. But there's also no, like, it doesn't call. Maybe it's because this specific application, you don't need to set the camera controller at any point outside of this, so it doesn't matter. It's not using that. And this is gonna start the loop, the animation frames, because this is gonna be false and this is gonna be true in the first one, I think. Because there isn't gonna be a frame token, and then it's gonna start the loop with this function here that creates the vectors and starts the drawing. Yeah, 0, so -0 is gonna be true. This is gonna start this loop with the drawing here, which it calls these and updates for everything. And this is gonna be this thing here. I assume this is gonna be the same thing. So it has variables and functions from this file and returns this. So this function that creates the view is going to return that. because you're calling and you're creating this API thing here, which has all the functions on this file. And this function is going to be this one, because this one, which is this one, which returns this thing. So you're essentially just passing all the functions on the other file to this one after you put events on them. I think that's what's happening. And then this one returns all the functions from this file to the other one. I think the reason why it's putting on the whole object and not on the functions is because it's gonna view that as a scene. So it views like the collection of all the functions on this file are like a class, and it wants the events to be on this class. And she's gonna go here. And it's very confusing still. Like that's the function that pretty much creates the thing. But I have to understand how this is related to the layout. The biggest challenge is understanding the loop, because I'm not really sure when, like if it is creating, I think it is creating a loop where it's drawing, calling this function each time. I guess I need to understand better how this works, because I think I understand, but I might be making some assumptions. Let's see if there are other music. I think the time is always almost, oh, it's already over. So I think I'm gonna stop here. Maybe I'll come back. I'm not really sure. Yeah, so, but probably I'm gonna continue to do this. So I think the goal now, I think this is a good approach that I came up with, which is understand more how this works and then study the Vue.js one and then try to bridge the gap. because I do want to make something that's pretty much the same as the way that VGS works here, where I can change the physics simulation and also is more animated, where it's not like some static thing. But I want to use WebGL because it's faster and it's better, I think. And also I want to do with the other library, which is the ngraph, because it allows me to, like, if I deconstruct everything and I try to build from scratch, then I'm going to understand how to set up all the events and how to customize in the way that I want. And that's the biggest problem with the, like, using directly VJS. So I think the best approach is to try to, like, start from what I have right now and then try to bridge the gap to VJS by converting everything to WebGL and making it work with the functions that I already have there. But I need to study a lot more to understand how everything is connected. I think it's becoming more and more clear with the more time I spend looking at this, but it's still, like, to understand is easy, but then to change is very hard because everything is connected. And then if you change one thing, you might change everything else, and then it's hard to know, like, what is creating the effects. But I need to understand how all the calculation and the loop is done to update the position of everything else, and then try to create the animations and try to approximate what I have through VGS. Then once I get to that point, then I can start thinking about, like, how to update the graph live with the data from the WebSocket in a way that is not gonna mess up. So that's the gap that I'm trying to bridge. And I think that's just the beginning. Then obviously there's endless amounts of things that I can think about doing. Yeah, but I might come back today later, or maybe just some other time and continue to do this. So see you